Hey, this is Walt from waltandpa.com as well as stogierreview.com, and I'd like to welcome you to the pilot episode of Shooting the Breeze podcast. Now, if you're familiar with my personal blog, you've seen the Shooting the Breeze videos before. For a year or better, I've been doing what I've been calling Shooting the Breeze videos, and basically these are videos where I simply sit down in front of a camera and discuss whatever topics come to mind. Could be anything from something funny I saw on TV last night to something my dog did that I found rather amusing. And over the time that I've been doing these videos, I've enjoyed doing them, and they've eventually started following a path and sticking more towards one subject. For a little while, they turned into the obedience training stuff that I was doing with my dog, and they were pretty consistent with that. After that, they were a bit strict on book reviews, and when I was doing a whole lot of reading, which I still try to do as often as I can, but the last morphing of the Shooting the Breeze video has been on guns, and of all the subjects that I've done, the gun subject is the one that I've enjoyed the most and seems most fitting with Shooting the Breeze. So this particular podcast, I'm not quite sure how long it's going to run or any of the particulars. I've got a loose outline in front of me on my laptop, and I'm going to try to follow it as best I can. But before we get into the podcast itself, I should probably tell you a little bit about me if you're not familiar with my blog and you're watching this for the first time or watching any of my videos for the first time. So, with that said, I am Walt White. I live in the Berks County area of Pennsylvania. I am pretty big into the cigar hobby, and I've been into firearms for maybe 5 years. Now, interestingly enough, the same person that got me into cigars got me into guns, and both times they were kind of just spur of the moment, accidental kind of a thing. I was sitting at home one day and I got a phone call from a friend of mine, and he says, "Hey, Walt, do you want to go up to the mountains and do Man's Weekend this weekend?" And I thought, yeah, sure. Man's Weekend was, as it was explained to me, was about a dozen guys, all friends, getting together and hanging out at this hunting cabin out in central Pennsylvania. And while there, you spent your mornings eating just a monstrous breakfast, followed by working around the property, maintaining it and things like that. And then you'd move into shooting for a couple of hours, and then in the evening it was just lots of beer and booze. And then we'd start all over again the following morning, and that's how the weekend progressed. This mutual friend of ours has 550 acres out in central Pennsylvania, and it's got a rather large hunting cabin. Big downstairs, the upstairs is just one big bunk room that sleeps about a dozen people. And I was kind of intimidated when I went. I had never shot a gun before. My family was more into archery, and I spent a lot of time doing that growing up. And I always kind of saw guns as the easy way to do things, because, what are guns for? Oh, they're more or less for hunting, and, well, a bow is challenging and things like that. So I always saw guns as sort of the easy way out, and I never had much interest in them. But I kept an open mind when I went up to Man's Weekend, quotes, and I wound up having a great time. I didn't have anything to bring. I had no experience, and it seemed like everyone there thrust the gun at me and said, "Okay, here's the safety procedure. This is how it works. Go ahead, point it down range and have fun." And I shot several hundred, if not thousands of rounds that weekend. I came home with a massive bruise on my shoulder. It was awesome, and a giant smile on my face. And shortly after that, I went out and I bought my first gun. It just so happened that the gun that I bought, which was a Yugoslavian SKS, was probably the one that I shot most during that weekend and enjoyed most. So after I picked it up, a friend of mine helped me clean up the mass of cosmoline, and we ended up, I ended up just taking that gun, putting it in a closet, and there it sat for 3 or 4 months until it was time to do Man's Weekend again. And that was kind of the routine. It would go in the closet and just sit, collect dust, and I'd break it out to go shooting for a weekend, and then it would wind up back in the closet, and I wasn't doing a whole lot of shooting. And eventually I decided, I want to get more into this. I really enjoy it, and I took an NRA basic pistol safety class with my wife. And we both really enjoyed it, and I've been getting more and more into the hobby since. I'm also a license to carry firearms license holder, and I've been doing that for about 4 years. I carry as much as I can. There are certain situations where I can't carry, for work, for instance, and there are places in Pennsylvania where I'm not permitted to carry, but like post offices and things like that. But I try to carry as often as I can, and I read up as much as I can on concealed carry and things like that, just to keep myself interested. I also shot my very first USPSA match last month, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. I did it primarily to test myself and see how I shot on the move and at targets in awkward situations, and I found it tremendously interesting, and it was a lot of fun, and I can't wait to do it again. I don't do it as a game. I mean, it is a game, but I don't go there trying to figure out how to game the stages to save a couple of seconds overall, half a second on this target, pick up a second or two, hitting this target and things like that. It's more of a way for me to keep my skills sharp and practice the fundamentals in a mildly stressful environment, and that's kind of where I'm at today. I'd mentioned that I am a cigar smoker. I've been smoking cigars for maybe 6 years, and coincidentally, the same person that got me into firearms also got me into cigars. He calls me up one day out of the blue, much like how he got me into firearms, and he says, "Hey Walt, come down my house when you get a chance. I have a bunch of stuff for you." So I didn't really ask any questions. I got in my car, I drove down his house, and on his dining room table he had this just massive stuff. There was a big trash bag on the corner, Tupperware containers throughout, a couple of humidors, and he starts loading up gallon-sized Ziploc bags for me to take home. So we get to talking, and he says that he was doing a side job for this woman, putting a window in, and she had asked him if he was a cigar smoker. He had mentioned that he smoked the occasional cigar with his father-in-law, and I guess that was good enough for her, because her late husband was a pretty big cigar collector, hobbyist, and after he passed away, she had all these cigars that she didn't know what to do with, so she wound up giving my friend just an incredible number of cigars, and he couldn't store them all and keep them all, so he started dividing them up amongst his friends. And we both got into the hobby that way. I probably got into it a lot more than he did, because his interest tapered off a little while after that stockpile of cigars were depleted. But I started filling up again. After my stock was depleted, I started hitting up JR Cigars International, things like that, and restocking and getting more into the cigar culture. And that's kind of where I'm at now. I mean, I try to learn as much as I can. The most important thing that I left out was that about five and a half years ago, a friend of mine started up a cigar blog, Jerry Cruz, and we've been doing Stogie Review for about 5 years. And one of the key features that we do that has brought us the most traffic is these video cigar reviews, which is kind of why I'm really comfortable with the concept of sitting down in front of a camera and just talking rather than typing stuff out. Over the last couple of years, I've developed a streamlined process to talk it to a camera and get it imported and back out onto the web in a nice, neat package, and that's kind of my thing. So that's why we're doing a video podcast as opposed to an audio podcast. It's just easier for me to do the video thing. So, now that you know about me and my firearms experience and my other cigar hobby, I kind of want to talk a little bit about where this video will be headed, or where this podcast will be headed. And this is kind of a loose guide for what to expect with the show, because it may change. I may make some tweaks here and there, but this particular show is going to follow the following outline. The first thing we're going to do is talk about news. These are primarily going to be self-defense stories, but I came across an essay in the New York Times, I believe, and I found it kind of interesting so I'm going to tack that in there as well. Once the news is complete, we're going to move on to a couple of articles that I want to feature that I've read. Something on guns, something I found interesting, something that I think you should check out because it was pretty cool. From there, we're going to highlight a cigar and drink pairing. I realize that this is a gun podcast, but I've got several requests to mix in cigar talk here and there. So I thought I would do a really quick cigar recommendation, drink pairing, and try to keep it pretty short, 2 to 5 minutes tops. From there, we're going to move on to a particular or a featured discussion topic, and then I'm going to close out the video. So it seems pretty straightforward. I have no idea how long this is going to last or if my voice is going to hold out, because this is actually the second time that I've done this video. The first time I had a bad tape in the camcorder and I didn't realize it until I tried to import the video. So bear with me as I stumble through this video podcast process. I've never done a video intentionally this long, so let's get started. Bah, 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 bah. Insert cheesy news music there, but at any rate, here we are with the news. Now, as I mentioned earlier, these are typically going to be self-defense stories that I come across, but this particular story is actually an essay posted in the New York Times by Aaron N. Marcus, MD. It was published on August 8th, 2011, and I read through it. The headline caught my attention. I read through it. I found it kind of grating a little bit, but I thought I'd read it, share it with you, and let you generate your own opinion, and I'll make a couple of little notes in there on what I think. So, at any rate, here's the article. Gun query off limits for doctors in Florida. As a primary care physician, I regularly ask patients questions that many people would consider rude, inappropriately nosy, or just irrelevant in polite conversation. Do you wear a seatbelt? How much alcohol do you usually drink? Do you use recreational drugs? Have you ever injected yourself with anything? Do you have sexual relations, and if so, with men, women, or both? Questions like these have long been a standard part of medical interviewing, and for good reason. The answer may reveal clues about a person's symptoms or physical findings on exam. If a person says he or she drinks heavily or has used intravenous drugs, I may be more alert to signs of liver problems when doing the physical exam, and more inclined to order certain blood tests. The answers also help me know if the patient is at greater risk for common yet preventable causes of death, like HIV, car accidents, and heart disease, so that I can counsel him or her. There's one customary question, though, that I'm no longer allowed to ask. In June, Governor Rick Scott signed a law barring Florida doctors from routinely asking patients if they own a gun. The law also authorizes patients to report doctors for quote-unquote unnecessarily harassing them about gun ownership, and makes it illegal to routinely document firearm ownership information in a patient's medical record. Other state legislatures have considered similar proposals, but Florida is the first to enact such a law. The law provides an exemption if the question is relevant to the patient's medical care or safety, though it doesn't specify what would qualify as relevant. Penalties for violating the law include disciplinary action by the Florida Board of Medicine, which could include citations, fines, and remedial education. Advocates of gun rights argue that routine questions about firearms violate their privacy and make them vulnerable to discrimination by insurance companies and the government, and offend common decency. As Marion Hammer, a former president of the National Rifle Association who lobbied for passage of the bill, put in letters to NRA members, Ms. Hammer said that the gun-owning parents had complained to her for many years about pediatricians' inquiries, which she believes are ineffective at preventing gun injuries. She contends that such inquiries are a part of political anti-gun agenda by the American Academy of Pediatrics. You don't go to a doctor to be interrogated or intimidated, she said. There's a clear line between violating privacy rights and imparting safety information. The AAP takes the position that guns are a public health issue and that pediatricians have a duty to ask about ownership because firearm injuries affect a large number of their patients. According to the group, firearms account for a third of all deaths from injury among teenagers and more than 1 in 5 deaths from injury among people ages 1 to 19. The Academy recommends that parents not have a gun in the home. When guns are present, it suggests they keep it unloaded in a secure, locked place with bullets stored separately. There's no political agenda. We're talking about the safety of children, said Dr. Lisa A. Cosgrove, president of the group's Florida chapter. The best way to protect them is to teach the parents how to protect them. Because the new law directly conflicts with accepted medical practices, some of my pediatrician colleagues have told me privately that they worry that not asking about firearms could put them at risk of a malpractice claim if the patient subsequently dies or is injured by a gunshot. Psychiatrists routinely inquire about guns too, and that law's requirement potentially place them in a legal predicament. As a general internist in South Florida, I often see the effects of gun violence. Many of my patients have been injured or disabled by a gunshot, or have had a family member shot and killed. Shortly after the new law went into effect, a local television station broadcast a story about a 4-year-old in Miami who was accidentally shot by his 17-year-old half-brother, who was playing with a .22 caliber rifle. The Florida chapters of AAP, the American Academy of Family Physicians, and the American College of Physicians have filed a suit contesting the law as a violation of the First Amendment right to free speech. Disclosure, this is actually in the article. I'm a member of the ACP, the major professional organization for internists, but I'm not involved with the litigation. End, comma, with disclosure. The suit, which calls the gun inquiry rule a gag law, contends that prevention is a cornerstone of medical practice and that free discussions are key to the doctor-patient relationship and are protected by federal privacy rules. At the moment, however, those of us working in a clinic or hospital will have to imagine we live in a place where gun injuries aren't a public issue and forget some of the questions we learned to ask in medical school. In doctors' offices in Florida, prevention has its limits. Obviously, this is kind of like, I don't know that I would call it anti-gun, but I kind of want to. The one part of this that really grabbed my attention, which I thought seemed extremely high, was that the talk of percentages and number of patients. I'm trying to find that really quick so that I can reread it. It's going right. They own a gun. Greater risk. Okay, I still can't find it. But at any rate, she makes mention that 1/3 of patients injured as a 1/3 of patients that died as a result of their injuries were from gun accidents. And I really wish I could find that again. This is a rather large essay. I apologize for having to read all that, but I thought it was kind of interesting. But at any rate, the numbers seem extraordinarily high. I mean, 1/3, which is 33%, 1 in 5, that's 20%. I don't know what's going on in this place in Miami, but that's an incredible number of injuries on guns. I find them rather high and unbelievable. Now, when you consider things like car accidents or car injuries, things like that. The other thing that grabbed my attention was the talk of a malpractice suit for not questioning a particular family about a gun. I mean, could you then apply the same logic and say, okay, I was in a car accident. My doctor did not counsel me on wearing a seatbelt. Therefore, I should be able to sue them for malpractice because they didn't tell me about the seatbelt or how to care for the seatbelt or when to wear the seatbelt. But the logic of, okay, I haven't counseled my patient about guns, so I'm opening myself up to a lawsuit, just sounds bogus to me. kind of an interesting take on the subject. Personally, I don't feel as though my doctor needs to know what I have in my home if it doesn't directly relate to the medical condition that I'm in his office, his or her office, to see them about, or if I'm not in the hospital as a result of a gun. There's really no need for my doctor to know what's in my home. It doesn't. It's a hobby. It's not a direct in a direct relationship with my health. So I'm kind of against this whole medical records having notes of firearm ownership in them and being lectured by a doctor who may or may not have any firearm experience telling me how to raise my children or how to store my guns in my home. And the idea of taking my gun, locking it in one case, locking the ammunition in another case is kind of a waste, if you ask me. I mean, what happens when things go bump in the night? Are you going to ask your friendly neighborhood burglar to hold on while you unlock your gun and then go retrieve your bullets, load it up, and then defend yourself? It seems as though this article was written by someone that had a beef with the new legislation and, wasn't quite immersed in the gun culture, if you will. So there's the first bit of news, which I found kind of interesting, a little grating, but kind of interesting. The next news article, which is where we're kind of going with the self-defense thing, is on self-defense. And this one is entitled, Fatal Shooting in Belmont with Self-Defense. Now, it looks like this story came from a local news station in North Carolina. It looks like Channel 9, WSOC-TV. And this one's nowhere near as long as the other one, so bear with me here. It's still kind of early, so if I'm stumbling over words, it's because I'm not really seeing right. I'm trying to squeeze this in before my day job starts, and it's about 5:30 a.m. right now. So, starts off with, this was posted on August 2nd, 2011, was updated on August 3rd. And the article says, Belmont, North Carolina. The Gaston County man who shot and killed an intruder Monday will not face any charges. In a Tuesday afternoon press conference, Belmont police said 20-year-old Daquan Thompson was acting in self-defense. Thompson asked Eyewitness News to blur his face on video, but showed where police said 27-year-old Isaiah Walker broke through his back door armed with a tire iron. He said they had only had a moment to think. I just took action, he said. It was the only thing I could do. It was him or me. I feared for my life. Belmont police said that Thompson's girlfriend, 23-year-old Jennifer McNeil, owed Walker money for damaging his car. She told Walker she was at Thompson's home, but then left. Thompson said 30 minutes later he started hearing knocks on his door and called his mother, telling her to call the police. Police said 24-year-old Jeffrey Gaither waited in the car outside while Walker broke into the home. When Jocelyn Greer called her son back, she said she received a shocking response. He said, "Mom, it's too late. They busted through the door and I think I shot somebody," Greer said. "I don't know if they're dead or alive." Neighbors said they're relieved Thompson was cleared of charges. They said it is also calming to see more police patrols in the area. According to the Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Office website, Isaiah Walker had previous charges of assault and arson. The website also shows that Jeffrey Gaither was charged in the past with assault and robbery. Police said they don't have evidence to charge Gaither in this case. The whole the girlfriend thing seems kind of shady. She calls up this person where she owes them money. She tells them where she is, and then, this guy, I guess, comes to collect the cash. That seems kind of awkward, but the fact that this guy was trying to break into this guy's house with a tire iron definitely is cause for concern, and I think that this guy did the right thing. It's if someone were breaking into my house with a tire iron, and I felt compelled to draw my gun. I think this is a life and death situation. The guy got what he deserved. So kind of a not so good story with kind of a happy ending. The bad guy, doesn't get to clobber and beat up the good guy with a tire iron. And the last story I thought was kind of interesting because I can really relate to this. And I'm sure everyone can, really. All right, now this article comes from St. Petersburg, Florida, from the Old Northeast Downtown St. Pete Patch. And it's entitled Applebee's Diner Shoots Mugger. And it starts off with twice in less than a week, a St. Petersburg resident has shot an armed suspect during an attempted robbery. An armed man wearing a ski mask who tried to rob a woman outside the Applebee's restaurant Sunday was shot by her boyfriend. Anthony Hauser, 19, was shot 4 times by Raven Smith of St. Petersburg and is hospitalized in serious condition at Bayfront Medical Center, police said. Smith, 35, has a permit to carry a concealed weapon, police said Monday. He acted in self-defense. The shooting marks the second time in 4 days when an armed robbery is thwarted by a citizen. In both cases, the suspect was shot by the victim's boyfriend, who observed the crime. According to the St. Petersburg police, Smith and his girlfriend, Leslie Tanner, 27, had parked their car in the Applebee's restaurant parking lot at 4700 4th Street North. They were preparing to go outside to get dinner at about 10:30 p.m. Tanner first got out of the car and walked to the rear of the vehicle, where she was approached by Hauser, who wore a ski mask and drew a gun. As Smith got out of the vehicle on the driver's side, he saw the suspect pointing a gun at Tanner. Smith drew his .380 caliber handgun, police said. He fired at Hauser, striking him 4 times. Hauser yelled at Smith to stop shooting. He pulled the mask off his face and claimed that the gun he was holding was, quote, fake, unquote. Police later said that Hauser's handgun was loaded, .25 caliber automatic. After the shooting, Smith flagged down an officer passing in the area, and Hauser was transported to Bayfront Medical Center, where he underwent surgery. He is expected to survive. No charges are pending against Smith. Smith and Tanner reside in North St. Petersburg. Hauser, a St. Petersburg resident, will be charged with 2 counts of attempted armed robbery. The attempted robbery is the second time in less than a week when an armed robber has been shot by a victim in St. Petersburg. On Friday, an ATM robber who had pulled a gun on a woman at the Regions Bank walk-up teller was surprised by the victim's boyfriend, who jumped out of a vehicle and wrestled him to the ground. The suspect was shot with his own gun. So this is kind of a situation where I can definitely see myself. I mean, my wife and I go to Applebee's every now and again. It's in a kind of a dark area in a strip mall, and there are a lot of things that could come creeping around the corner at night. So I can most definitely envision myself getting out of the car, walking around, and seeing some guy in a ski mask pointing a gun at my wife. And in that particular situation, I think I would act the same way. And to make matters worse, I mean, I could even see my daughter being in the back seat of the car and being in the vicinity of the muzzle that's being pointed at my wife. And in which case, I also feel as though I need to draw and fire, or I would need to draw and fire, because even if this gun was quote-unquote fake, it makes really no difference. I mean, unless it's like flopping around in rubber, there's really no way to tell in the heat of the moment kind of a situation. So another situation where this guy got what he deserved, and I found it kind of amusing that he got shot 4 times and then he stops to yell, "Please don't shoot me anymore." So kind of interesting, but funny. But guy got what he deserved. And that's going to wrap it up for the news. Alright, from here we're going to move on to featured content. Well, it is time for featured content. I normally want to do 3 featured posts. Something that I found across the web relating to guns that I found interesting. And found interesting enough to want to share with you. Now, in this episode, I only have 2 featured topics. I had 3, but I wound up taking one off, and then I added one later, and then I took it back off again, and I added something else, and I took it back off again, and I never got around to adding another piece back in there. And even after my first take, I still didn't add another one in. So let's run with 2. Now, the first featured article or post or audio podcast or video podcast or whatever the case may be in a given episode, this one is by Shelley over at Gun Nuts Media. Now, Gun Nuts is a website that I try to read as often as I can. I found it has a lot of interesting information, and in particular, I like reading Shelley's stuff. It's more new gun person friendly, I think, where Caleb seems to provide information that's geared more towards the advanced shooter, the guy that's doing competitive shooting and things like that. He's posting stage videos and things. And Shelley keeps it kind of light and keeps the reading easy. And because I still consider myself a novice, even after shooting for 4 or 5 years, I still like to get that sort of gun 101 education and build up my education from the ground up instead of just sort of diving into one aspect and sticking with it. Shelley does a broad range of topics, and many of them are very interesting. And this one is on making your own targets and, not needing to buy zombie targets or anything that'll cost you a couple of bucks to essentially blow holes in. And she explains that there's a couple of things that you can do at a range, whether it be indoor range or outdoor range, to kind of spice up your shooting. For instance, you could take a typical bullseye target and draw a head, arms, and legs on it. And for pennies, or you may even have these things lying around in your range bag, you've got something entertaining to shoot at. You could take your typical dot target and try to make a face out of it. 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth. Some happy, some upset. But just a way to keep yourself entertained. She also says you can get into origami and start folding things up and hang like a giant battleship at the end of the range, which would be pretty cool, to be honest with you. I'm not very handy with origami and stuff, but a lot of ranges only allow paper targets. So here's a kind of a new angle on the paper target aspect. You could create, whatever you want as long as you could fold up the paper. So I thought this article was pretty cool, and it also kind of got my mind to moving. What do I do instead of going out and buying targets? Because I don't buy zombie targets, but I do shoot them. I am a draftsman by trade, and where I work, we have a large format plotter. And we do a lot of plotting of architectural drawings. We print on these rolls. They come in a variety of widths, but generally they're about 150 feet long. And when those rolls start getting down really short, say 5, 6, maybe as much as 10 feet on the roll, generally I take them off, because if I need to print a job, let's say it's 25 sheets of 24 by 36, 6 feet of paper is just going to be more trouble than it's worth. So I'll pop the roll off, I'll put a new one on, and I'll take that roll and stick it in the corner. Well, after I get sick of seeing these piles of paper in the corner, I take them, I load them back up in the plotter, and I start printing targets, whether they're torso targets, zombie targets, and I use up the paper that way instead of just pitching the last couple of feet into the dumpster. And then, I roll these things up and I got them in my trunk, and when I go to the range, I take one out and start blasting away at it. Another thing I do is I made myself an IDPA template. Basically, I just took a target and created a template out of it onto Masonite. And what I do is I just take this Masonite template and I drop it onto a piece of scrap cardboard. I trace the outline, and I have cuts inside the target where I can mark the scoring zones. Now, this has allowed me to use up a lot of scrap cardboard or stuff that I'd be cutting up and throwing away, or cutting up and putting out for recycling. And it's a great way to use up cardboard. Because I have a 1-year-old daughter, we're constantly buying things that come in big boxes, for a high chair, or a new toy horse that on wheels that she rolls around the house. A lot of these things, when you break down the box and unfold it, it gets kind of large, so you can get 1 or 2 targets out of it, and then I don't have to cut it up into neat, tidy squares and bundle it up and put it out with my recycling. Instead, I could just take it to the range, stick it on a target stand, blow some holes in it, and then throw it away. So it's much easier to shoot it. I just have to store it a little bit instead of cutting it up and stuff. And I really don't mind having 6 or 8 targets on hand. So that is the first featured post. The next one comes from Rick and Steve over at the Power Factor show. Now, this show is one that I came across recently. It's funny because when I first saw the show on the Gun Rights Radio Network, it was in the sidebar, and I just kind of glanced at it. And immediately I thought, okay, this is a show on reloading. I want to get into reloading, but it's not something that's really pressing at this time. So, there's all these other podcasts for me to listen to. I'll get that one later. And so there it sat in the sidebar. I never really looked into it, and I just assumed that it was on reloading. Well, for one reason or another, I wound up on the Power Factor show page, and lo and behold, it's a show on practical shooting. And that's fantastic. I can't believe I didn't find this sooner. Having shot my first USPSA match last month, I find the subject fascinating, and one of the things that they do, the post that I'm featuring here, is on breaking down the stages 1 through 4 at the Double Tap Championship. This is episode 31. And the guys walk you through all of these stages. They show you a diagram of the stage, and then they actually take you into the stage via video, and they show you them shooting it, and then they analyze what they did. They show you why they reloaded in a certain position as opposed to another, how they transitioned from one target to the next, the sequence in which they engage these targets, and they go back and forth and analyze this stuff. And I found it really interesting because when I went to my first USPSA match, I saw the stage and I got a game plan, but for the most part, when that buzzer went off, I just went charging down the line and I started shooting the first thing that I saw. And these guys take it to kind of a science. You want to you want to engage this target, transition to this target, because after this target, your magazine's going to be empty, and then you're going to be transitioning here so you can reload during the move. And it's just, I found it to be really interesting and a lot of fun. Now, this is episode 31. I think they have a couple of more recent episodes. This is just the one that I watched most recently. So I'm not terribly out of date with the show, so I'm going to go backwards and start working through the previous shows and watch all of them. And I'm looking forward to keeping current with the show. Again, really interesting stuff. You should definitely check it out. Now, as I mentioned, I only had 2 featured items as opposed to the 3 that I wanted to have. So from here, we're going to dive right into our cigar and drink pairing. Now, keeps going out. Talking too much. And the cigar is ginormic for this time of the day. But I want to keep this relatively short, so we're just going to dive right into it. My beverage is coffee. I'm drinking it out of a big to-go cup because I drink very slow, and I think that cold coffee is one of the most disgusting things on the planet. And a to-go cup keeps it hot for a longer period of time. The coffee is just Caribou coffee out of a Keurig machine. My wife and I switched over to a Keurig, and I haven't cared as much about coffee. Back before we got the Keurig, I was really big into Black Dog coffee, and I thought it was fantastic. But convenience took over, and now we just pick up whatever at the grocery store for the Keurig. The cigar, I don't have the band on it at this time. Actually, I grabbed one without a band, but in the image, you'll see that this is an EP Creo New Wave, Connecticut. This particular cigar is the El Decano, which is a 6x60. It's got an Ecuadorian Connecticut wrapper, and I'm not quite sure of the price point. This cigar was recently released at this year's big cigar trade show. I didn't get a chance to go this year, and I don't know what the pricing is. However, the Churchill, which is the size, the next step down from the 6x60, costs about $7. So I would imagine the 6x60 being $7.50, $8. If a Robusto is more your thing, I think they're about $5.25. These make great morning cigars, especially with coffee. They're medium-bodied, nice, full-flavored, pretty easy on the palate, nice and smooth. Just good, solid, enjoyable cigar. These can be found in a lot of places. I would imagine you can get these at Famous, being one of the big online retailers. But if you want to go to a smaller shop and support a local retailer, my suggestion would be to reach out and get in contact with Mike over at Buckhead Cigars in Atlanta. Call him up, tell him what you want, and he will get it out to you right away, packaged with a Boveda pack, and great service. I've been using Mike for quite a while now, and very, very happy to be a customer of Buckhead Cigar. Well, it is time to discuss our featured topic of the show. I was going to say week, but I don't know how often these shows are going to be, so we'll just stick to featured topic of the show. And the topic I want to talk about is selling firearms on the internet. Now, going into this, I want to say that I have never sold a firearm on the internet, so don't take this as advice from the gun selling guru. Instead, take this as advice from the consumer looking to purchase a gun on the internet. I tend to look at classifieds a lot, and that's where I'm going with this. I want to talk a little bit about used guns, especially sold on forums and things like that. And some of the things that have caught my attention over the past year and a half of actively looking at classifieds. Now, one of the one of the things that kind of grate my nerves the most is going into a classified section on the forum, and you see Beretta PX4 Storm for sale. You go in there, and what do you see? And this is worst case scenario. I have a Beretta PX4 Storm. I'm looking to trade, but I'm not sure what I want. Contact me for details. Well, for starters, you didn't tell me anything about the gun. You didn't tell me what kind of condition it's in. You didn't tell me what you thought of your gun. You don't provide any pictures. I have to contact you for those. And you don't give me a price. So it's like it couldn't get any worse. This particular ad is something that really has just been a waste of my time. I usually pass and keep going. I won't contact someone to ask for a price, ask for pictures, all that stuff. If you don't provide that for me up front, I'm really not interested. A little better is all of the information about their particular gun and no picture. Again, I'm really big on pictures. If you're going to try to sell me something, or if you're going to pitch something to me, my ideal post would start off with what you're selling me, the area that you're selling the gun in, and the price in the subject line. This tells me whether or not I need to find an FFL that's willing to accept a shipped order, determine how much additional money is going to go into shipping this firearm, because ideally I would like to find someone selling something local so that we can meet at a predetermined FFL dealer and do the transfer there. And being concise on what you're selling is great. Just seeing Glock doesn't really do me a whole lot of good. But pictures are fantastic. I mean, with the digital age, and cameras are pretty much everywhere. I mean, practically every cell phone seems to have a camera these days. And even if it's an older phone that doesn't take great pictures, you can get the job done by taking the gun out in the natural sunlight and taking a couple of pictures of it. If there are potential problems with anything on the gun, try to get as many pictures as possible. As a consumer, I want to see all that stuff before I meet you and look at the gun with my own eyes. And maybe it's just me, and I realize that it's counterproductive to selling the gun, but if you point out all of the things that you don't like about the gun or the problem areas with the gun, I feel as though I can trust you more. And who knows, I might be willing to deal with this problem, or willing to get this problem fixed if the price is right. Which leads to another thing that I see most often, is the price is not right in most scenarios. I mean, I realize that guns hold their value really well, but on many occasions I've seen a classified ad, it's caught my attention, everything is good, it tells me the price, where it's at, it gives me a description of the item they're selling, there's pictures, any problem areas are pointed out, but then we come down to the price, and I'll hop on someplace like Bud's Guns or Gun Broker, and I'll start looking at the pricing of these guns new. And a lot of times what I'll see is new gun pricing and what this individual wants for it are only, $20 or $30 different. I mean, I'm taking a big risk by buying a used gun, which may or may not have any type of warranty from the manufacturer. Usually, or at least in some cases, that warranty is only honored to the original purchaser of the gun. So I could be spending a lot of money on a big risk that I may not be able to get fixed for free from the manufacturer. I may have to pay out of pocket. So unless the price difference is enough to catch my interest and make me willing to take that gamble, a lot of times I'll just pass them over. And usually when everything is done right and the gun's priced well, those classified ads don't last long. There have been half a dozen guns that I was really interested in buying. I contact the seller and find out that the gun is already sold. You know, it's been less than 24 hours and someone has already claimed the gun. And that's great. I love seeing that. It shows that the firearms community is buying and selling and willing to trade, and I like seeing that. In one particular situation, I remember seeing a gun that I was really interested in. The price was right, everything was right. I contacted the seller, or right before I contacted the seller. This goes back to telling me everything that you know about the gun that you may or may not like. So before I contact the seller, I decide to look up his previous posts, and I look through his posts, and I see one, sure enough, on this particular gun. It's about a year old, but I click on it anyway, and I start reading through, and he's not happy with the gun. He's talking about problems that it's having. It's not extracting properly. Something isn't quite right with the gun. It's not operating properly. So when I contacted him, I pointed out the old post. I said, "Hey, is this still a problem?" Quoted the post where he was pointing out the issues, and the response I got back was something along the lines of, "Well, I don't know. I don't have the gun here. I lent it to a friend. He's had it for about a year. It's not his thing. It's not my thing. So we're just looking to sell it. It's probably not a problem anymore. No big deal." Well, that type of response really turned me off, and I responded back, "Thank you for your time, but I'm going to pass." So, as a consumer, the best thing to get me to look into purchasing your gun is providing as much information as possible, lots of pictures, and tell me if there's anything wrong with the gun up front, because if I find it buried in the forum elsewhere, I'm going to kind of think this is a kind of a shady deal, and then I'm going to walk away. And chances are, when I walk away, in the back of my mind, I'm going to have your name, and when I see it pop up in the classified section again, I'm just going to dismiss it, and I'm not going to give it a second look. So that's going to wrap up the Shooting the Breeze episode 1, the pilot episode. I'm not quite sure how long this wound up being, but future shows will probably be a bit shorter because I don't have to go through the whole introduction thing and explain who I am and what the podcast is about and things. So over time, maybe this will become a little more streamlined, and we'll add some features here and there and talk about what I've done with guns since the previous episode, which I kind of wanted to talk about in this episode, but I didn't want this to get terribly long because I'm kind of in the Stone Age here. I'm recording this on an HD camcorder. However, it uses Sony Mini DV HD cassettes, which are rather pricey, and I'd rather not use a whole bunch of them to record one episode. So I really appreciate the fact that you've watched the video this far, and thank you for watching however long this turned out to be, and I look forward to hearing some feedback from you. Is there anything you would like to see in the show, anything you would like to be taken out of the show? Would you like more opinion on a particular topic, things like that? So again, thank you, and until next time, happy shooting, happy smoking, and I will catch you later.